Welcome. Hi, I'm Mikki, and this is Mikkipedia, where I sit down and chat to doctors, professors, athletes, practitioners, and experts in their fields related to health, nutrition, fitness, and well-being. And I'm delighted that you're here. Morning everyone, it's Mikki here. You are listening to Mikkipedia, and this week on the podcast I speak to national powerlifting champion, mentor and registered nutritionist Julianne Taylor about her training, her nutrition approach and her general awesomeness. And awesome she is. Julianne and I have known each other for almost 10 years now, and we have a shared interest and passion for evolutionary health, for nutrition and training in general, particularly strength training, evidently, and protein intake in women, but also being quite practical about our approaches. So we share a lot of similarities, and I've learned a lot from Julianne over the years. She was one of the first zone nutritionists in New Zealand, and we discuss the similarities between zone, paleo, and what we advocate now. We also discuss the importance of calories in assisting fat loss. Julianne is a wealth of information, and we do talk a lot of practical tips here, so I think you'll find this a great conversation. Before we jump into the interview, I would just like to remind you that you have 2 days to sign up to Monday's Matter September edition. So this kicks off Monday 5th of September. It is an 8-week group fat loss program. It utilises protein sparing modified fast days that are couched in an approach that could be your forever diet. You guys know I love protein, you know I love vegetables, and I'm all about strategic carbohydrate for when you need it. And also the approach that I take, being dairy and predominantly gluten-free, is such a game changer when it comes to things like hormonal health, particularly in those perimenopausal years. But it isn't just a female program, and I have plenty of men go through it and just absolutely love it. So that is Monday's Matter. You will find links in the show notes to that, and you have, if you're picking this up on Wednesday, you have 2 days or 3 days, Wednesday, Thursday and Friday, to jump on in, and you will have an amazing bunch of people going through it with you. It is all about community and that strength of community in order to help you kickstart your fat loss into your forever diet approach. All right, team, please enjoy this interview I have with Julianne Taylor. Julianne Taylor. It is great to have this opportunity to sit down and chat to you, because you've been obviously a colleague over the years, a good friend, and a mentor in this nutrition space. And I have learned so much from you in terms of just like, obviously in the nutrition space, but also of what you can actually do as you get older. And I think that's such a valuable thing that I want us to talk about, so other people are also sort of inspired by it as well. So I'm really interested to chat about your career trajectory, but also, of course, your athletic endeavours. And can you have imagined, Julianne, that as a 62-year-old, that you would be representing sort of New Zealand in the World Championships for powerlifting if you had to think about yourself like 40 years ago? Was it ever on your radar?
Never. So I have never been particularly athletic. Like, I wasn't one of those kids that showed athletic promise. So, like when we were in primary school, to give you an example, we all had to play netball. In my school, my little school, and the teams were from A to F, and there wasn't anything after that, and I was in the F team. Oh. So I wasn't that great. I did show a bit of promise in swimming when I did some squad training for a couple of years, but at 5'1", you're never going to make a swimmer, so that kind of dropped off the radar. And after that, I didn't really do anything, just on and off to the gym for years and years. And yes, and to answer your question, no, I could. It's kind of unimaginable and very weird, because it doesn't feel like I'm not I don't regard or never have regarded myself as an athlete. So it's come as a complete surprise.
Yeah. But are you sort of owning it now? It seems like what I love it when I'm looking at your Twitter feed and I'm looking at your Instagram feed, and you show pictures of you in training, but also video and things like that. I feel like you're sort of coming into it and sort of beginning to own it a little bit more.
Yes. Although it still doesn't feel like an identity. I'm not quite sure how to describe it. It's like I identify myself as, I don't know, somebody who likes learning, for example.
Yeah.
And nutrition and working with people and figuring stuff out. It's almost a little bit of a side thing.
Yeah. So how did that even eventuate? So how did you get into the sport? Because I feel like if I think about people I know in my life who sort of have a certain identity or a way of doing things, it's actually such a difficult transition to try something new and then actually sort of excel at it. So I feel like you're quite unusual in that regard. Yet also it could be quite inspirational for people listening.
Yes. So, I mean, as I said, I've been to the gym on and off since I was 18. So being in a gym environment to kind of keep fit and look good has always been in my background. That's always been there. I mean, I think like a lot of people, just casually going to the gym and then dropping it for a while and then going back. As a teenager and in my 20s, I used to ride a bike a lot to get around.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of a bit nervous of doing that these days, but I used to do a lot. So I guess my legs got a good workout on a daily basis. So there's a little bit of that in the background. Anyway, how did I get into it? 2009, I started working with a CrossFit gym. Because they were really interested, and this goes into my nutrition side, in having a coach that understood the zone diet. Because I don't know if you know CrossFit, but the zone diet and the Paleo diet are kind of the diets they've combined and promote to their people. So I went off to this CrossFit gym, started coaching some of the clients, thought, well, if I'm going to talk to people about nutrition, I better figure out what it's like to actually do CrossFit. So I started doing CrossFit a couple of times a week, eventually went to 4 times a week. And that's when I first started the deadlift, the squat as movements. And yeah, I noticed that one of my tendencies was I was able to get strong relatively quickly for my age. So after I stopped CrossFit, because I just had some little niggling injuries that didn't clear up, I went just back to normal kind of a gym, and one of the PTs there, personal trainers, she was advertising an 8-week one-on-one coaching for powerlifting for females. So I thought, oh, that's a cool thing to do. I might as well just do something that challenges myself and just see what happens. So that's where it started. So I started at an above average strength for my age when I did her powerlifting program, and really enjoyed it, noticed some pretty quick strength improvements, and just kept going because I liked it, and I liked the challenge of doing something with an outcome versus just going to the gym.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where she said, you're probably strong enough to compete. And I'm like, what? That's crazy.
Yeah.
Looked up where I stood in terms of being able to compete. And yes, my lifts were competitive.
Wow.
In terms of at a regional level. So I asked around, got a powerlifting coach, and did my first competition in April 2018, Auckland Regionals.
So your coach for powerlifting as a competitor was different from the one that you started with in your gym?
Yes. So the personal trainer hadn't been a competitor herself, so she didn't know the the rules for competition and the specific challenges that you face in a competition, like, getting squat depth and the calls they make while you're doing your lifts. So, yeah, she recommended I found a powerlifting coach.
And so after Auckland Regionals?
So regionals, my goal was to, at that stage, I was under 60. I was 59. And my goal was to qualify for nationals. So I just managed the qualifying total for nationals. And then nationals was in August. So I kept training. And my goal for nationals was to qualify for worlds. So in nationals, I hit the qualifying total for worlds.
So is it a total of the weight you can lift, a sum of all of the weight over the 4 lifts? Is that right?
The three lifts, yes. So your deadlift, your squat, and your bench gets added together, and that's your total. And each category has a qualifying total. So I wouldn't, I'm a mile off qualifying for the opens, but in my age category and in my weight category, I qualified for worlds. So yes, so that was a little bit surreal, really. And then I was like, okay, well, if I qualify, I might as well apply to go and compete for New Zealand. And I was accepted to compete in the Masters 3, it was, because it was my first year as Masters 3, just turning 60, in the under 52 weight category. And that was in June 2019 in Sweden.
Wow, amazing. And what was that experience like?
I don't know. I just, the way I approach things is just put one foot in front of the other. It's like when thing's overwhelming, it's like a marathon, you just keep taking one step at a time and then eventually you're at the end. So it feels a little bit like that. So I just kept training. I was very focused on training because it was very important to me that I didn't let myself down, that I didn't, let New Zealand down. So training, eating, sleeping was my big focus leading up to that, for the 6 months leading up to that. Yeah, and I think when you're just focused on that, it's not so nerve-wracking because you feel quite prepared. But it was, I don't know how to describe it. It was a little bit surreal being in that environment with all these other small, strong, old women like me.
Actually, you're right. Because in real life, it's a bit of an anomaly, actually.
Yes. So to have us all together in a group was it was really nice. It was nice sort of talking to them, getting to know them and their background and why they're there as well, and all with the same goal in mind to do well in an international competition. So
Julianne, you're in that sort of 6 months training period. Obviously, so how often would you have trained in the week? Because I'd love to sort of dive a little bit into the training that you do, and then of course talk about the nutrition approach and how you sort of approached that. So first, the training, how does that look?
So at that time I was doing 4 sessions a week. And 2 sessions were back to back, but I needed enough time for recovery for some of the heavier ones, like the squats and the deadlifts. I have to take a day off in between, so a good 48 hours between lower body strength exercises to have good recovery. Typically, sessions at the gym would take around 3 hours. So it's not like, I don't know if you've seen some of the jokes where they talk about CrossFitters, taking a nap in between their lifts. Because literally it feels like that. So in order to be able to continue to do heavy sets, I mean, you're never at your max. It's always, 80% or whatever. But to be able to do a set of 5 or 3 or whatever it is, squats at a reasonably heavy weight, you need to actually have I need a good 5 minutes for my muscles to get to a point where I can do that
Yeah.
comfortably again. So, it's not like you probably spend 3 hours at the gym, but 2 hours of that is resting in
Yeah.
between sets.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the warm up. So you have to warm up to your weight. You can't just go, oh, I'm just going to do some 80 kilo squats. You have to do body weight, 20s, 40s, 60s, 70s, 80s. So that takes, and some mobility before that. So that can take a good half hour before you even start on your lifting sets.
And did your physique change quite a bit in that real focused time of training for Worlds?
Not enormously. It changed over the kind of years, I guess. But wasn't like there was no sudden changes. Like, I'm actually pretty much the same size as I was then, and my muscles have grown a little. I think from what I see on sort of the scales that look at your body composition, I've actually only gained about a kilo or so muscle mass since I stopped CrossFitting, because I gained some then. But what I do notice is the shape of my muscles is a little bit, my butt. I've certainly got I tell you, one thing I notice about getting older is your butt gets really flat unless you work your butt.
Yes.
So I've actually got the best butt of my life.
That's amazing. As a runner, I have no butt and have had none forever. So I'm not quite sure how mine is going to progress as I get older. Unless, of course, I also get into something like powerlifting and preserve that.
Glute work.
Exactly.
And my muscles, the density, that's what I noticed, the big thing. So they're like super hard compared to what they were.
Yeah, amazing. And also, of course, despite the change or the lack of, not the lack of, but that your hypertrophy or muscle growth or gain hasn't been huge, the strength that you're able to, that you've gained would be massive. And, I actually it was only a week ago, Julianne, I was listening to a podcast, and who was it? It was Peter Attia talking to Andrew Huberman, I think, or it was someone like that. And they were talking about how that you can build, it was Andy Galpin, if you know him. And he was saying how with hypertrophy, you do need that sort of rest in between to allow the muscle to grow. But strength is something you can work on every single day. And that was news to me, actually. If strength is all you're actually interested in, rather than muscle growth per se, then you could do the same exercises every day. And I'm like, I had no idea.
I mean, that's part of the powerlifting, is you do the same exercises over and over. I mean, there are variations, and you do some auxiliary exercises. But basically, you're just doing a progressive overload program, and you're doing the same exercises over and over and over again. And you build strength for those specific exercises.
And Julianne, with regards to your diet, and even though I'm talking about you sort of in the lead up to 2019 World, but I know that you've also competed much more recently as well. How does that change for you? Because, you're petite anyway, but obviously you're in a particular weight class. So how does that look for you in that where you naturally would sit at, and then also where you'd need to get to?
Yes, so I naturally I compete at under 52, although I have competed under 57 just to see if there was any difference in terms of what I could achieve. But I naturally sit at 53, 54 kilos. So I always have to cut. And even to sit at 53, 54, I'm very, very conscious of how much I'm eating. I'm not one of those people who can just kind of eat what they feel like and not put on weight. I put on weight and always have done really, really easily, and have been a lot heavier in my 20s. So I'm very conscious of portion sizes. I'm very structured with my eating. I have 3 meals a day, 4 or 5 hours apart, and a larger afternoon snack. So literally four meals a day and nothing in between, like just something to drink. I don't snack. I am very conscious of how much protein I have. I think that's one of the biggest things. So with muscle protein synthesis, leucine is super important, and getting over that leucine threshold 4 times a day with 4-hour gaps in between, and eating the optimal amount of protein 4 times a day is something I have been conscious of and do kind of quite rigorously, because it I believe, plays a really important role in being able to optimize my training, my strength, and my recovery.
Yeah. And even though, you talk of to sit at your sort of more comfortable 53, 54, you still have to be conscious about what you eat. Do you find that a chore?
Sometimes. Yep, I do. Like especially things like when I go away on holiday, for example, and there's lots of social events, and people invite you over for dinner, and you're always having like the platters and the snacks and the alcohol. I will just start to put on weight if I'm not really careful. So, and I dislike that because I can't fit my clothes and I just feel uncomfortable. So yeah, it's a little bit of a chore, but on the other hand, it's just become just a pattern and a habit, and it's just where I feel good. So the rewards are, I feel really good because my eating makes me feel really healthy and really well and gives me lots of energy. It's like anything, isn't it? You go exercise even though you don't enjoy it, but you feel really good afterwards. So even though it's a bit of a chore,
yeah,
you like the rewards. So it's a bit like that with my eating.
It's so interesting because I often think, I look at us and I think we're quite similar in a lot of ways, and in our sort of our love of nutrition and nutrition science and how geeky we are, and we enjoy sport, different sort of sports, but the same sort of stuff as well. And I've always thought, similar to you, like if I ate anything at all, I would absolutely gain weight. But I don't feel like it's a chore to eat the way I eat, because for all of the reasons that you've just described, actually, it's super easy for me to not be bothered if there's chocolate around, because I don't necessarily want it, but it's at all, in fact. And I wonder how much of that is a learned thing, or actually I truly don't want it, And I always think nutritionists do restriction very well. And people, and that's almost like a bit of a superpower. So a lot of nutritionists I know, it doesn't feel like restriction because they're so good at it. But I think you're right. It's that habit that's been put in place from very early on, because of course your nutrition interest started well before your sort of powerlifting sort of interest. So you almost came into the sport with that sort of under your belt, because I feel like people would find that a lot more challenging if they were very new to the whole kind of thing of competing in sport.
Yes, totally. And I think my ability to exercise has been because of my diet and not the other way around. Because well before this, I've always wanted to manage my weight because I've always put weight on easily. So some of the diets I did when I was younger were ridiculous, like to the point where I would count my calories, but all I would eat is chocolate all day. I mean,
yeah.
you would not believe the nutty diets I was on when I was younger.
No, I would, believe you me. Cabbage soup diet, did you try that?
No, but I did do the Israeli army diet, which is 2 days apples, 2 days cheese, 2 days boiled eggs, and 2 days chicken breast.
I don't know that sounds all that bad, to be honest.
It's actually not that bad, and it's a really, really good way. And I think it came from the army, like getting them to lose weight quite quickly. You can eat as much as you want of those as well, which is good because you don't feel deprived. But if you're only eating protein with a little bit of fat and then one day you're only eating apples, it's actually, you get so sick of it. And also you don't feel deprived when you're eating, lots of protein, really. And it's only 2 days, it's only 8 days all up.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a very effective way to drop weight.
Totally.
Quickly.
And actually, I think back to my sort of like late teens and in my 20s when similar to you, and even early teens really, when my mother and I were on different diets or whatever. And I think despite the fact that a lot of them were a bit crazy, you learn things along the way about how food makes you feel, and also like what actually helps satisfy you, what is going to help you adhere. So, it's like Weight Watchers. There are so many things I disagree with Weight Watchers, but one of the best things I learned was that you could still eat a good volume of food and feel satisfied, but still have it low energy density, so low calories. And I think when I talk to people now about how they eat and they have a sandwich which might have, a lot more calories, but because it's such a small volume, that's just another lever that someone can pull to help change their approach to feel more satisfied and feel a little bit, like something's achievable.
Yeah, so I think going back to diets, like where I learned that was when I did the thing that triggered all this off, and I'm not sure if you're going into talking about eating now, was, being on and off diets forever. Anyway, at the point where I discovered the zone diet, I actually had stopped dieting for about...
Okay. How old were you at this point?
35.
How did you find it?
Well, my husband, who wasn't my husband at the time, my boyfriend at the time, he also interested in nutrition and sports and things. He was over in America and picked up this book called Enter the Zone by Barry Sears, and he read it and thought, I'm going to try this. And I'm like, oh, that's very interesting. I read it. And interestingly, it wasn't just so much the weight loss, but this whole new realm of appetite regulation, optimizing your protein, favorable carbs versus unfavorable carbohydrates.
Yeah.
Favorable fats, unfavorable fats, like food quality played a really big role in optimizing protein, and learning that, 4 cups of broccoli has the same amount of carbohydrates as, half a cup of rice. It's like, wow, I never knew that, and managing your blood glucose and insulin levels, like reactive hypoglycemia had always been an issue for me, but I'd learned a lot about what carbs worked for me and what carbs didn't. And the other thing in his book he talked about was women he worked with who had PMT, whose PMT disappeared on this magic, 40-30-30 ratio. So I thought, man, I was somebody that suffered from really intense breast pain before my periods. And I thought if I could manage that, that would make such a difference to my life quality. And if I could lose fat and keep my muscle, that's something I've never tried before. So yeah, I went on the zone diet and blood glucose regulation. I mean, I just felt so much energy and so much mental focus doing that.
So Julianne, can you just describe for those listening who wouldn't know the zone diet, what exactly is it? Like what nutrients are like 40, 30 and 30? Like how does that look?
Yeah, so it's based on the premise that every meal you eat provides hormonal control for the next 4 to 6 hours. And each nutrient triggers a sequence of hormones. So carbohydrates increase your blood glucose, which increases your insulin levels. Fats can have some satiety effect on CCK, for example, which is a appetite regulation hormone. Protein increases glucagon, which is also sent out by the pancreas, and glucagon increases your blood glucose via the liver. And he talked about having a balance of protein, carbohydrates, and fats in order to get this balance of insulin, glucagon, and also your blood glucose. And so that provided like a stability in your hormones and blood glucose for the next 4 hours. And so he had this kind of magic ratio, which is 30% calories from protein, 30% calories from fats, and 40% calories from carbohydrates, and a kind of a mix and match way of putting meals together. So that's it.
Do you count calories on the zone? I can't remember.
No, you don't. You don't count calories, but calories do reduce on the zone diet. So that's something I didn't understand at first, like appreciate at first that because he didn't talk about calories, he just talked about grams of protein, carbs, and fats at each meal. And it didn't occur to me that calories were quite markedly reduced because I didn't actually feel particularly hungry because that balance worked really well for me in terms of appetite regulation. Calories are reduced, appetite regulation is improved, blood glucose balance is improved, and as a consequence, I lost 5 kilos over, sort of 3 or 4 months, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. And my PMT went away, my breast pain went away, and I would love to know if anyone out there knows that mechanism for that. I don't quite understand how that worked, but it was quite miraculous for me.
Yeah. And so at the time, were you a nutritionist, Julianne, or did this spark your interest in nutrition?
No, it wasn't. I was actually trying to figure out what I wanted to do in life. So again, not for the first time. So at the time I was working as a wheelchair seating and positioning specialist. So I'd done a postgrad diploma in design of equipment for disability in London, and I'd spent the last 10 years, or the last 6 years working in that career, but not getting to the point where I'm not sure if I want to do this anymore. Was actually at art school full-time, decided to go back and be an artist because I've always been really good at it. Then discovered this nutrition thing, and it was like mind blown. I cannot describe how enthusiastic I became when I discovered that diet could make such a significant impact on my health, on my energy, and my gym recovery, which is the other thing, because I was on a fairly low protein vegetarian type diet before that. And upping the protein, I was just like, I cannot believe the strength gains and the recovery as a result of increasing my protein. It was like miraculous.
And do you actually also, just as a side note, this is what I see with clients all of the time, and you must see it as well. Like when you make small changes to their protein, light bulbs go off in their heads and they cannot believe that suddenly they're in control of their food as opposed to them feeling controlled by their diet. It is actually amazing.
Yeah. And it's like every time, I ask clients when I follow them up, it's like, so you've changed your diet. Oh, I don't even feel like snacking. Oh my gosh, I didn't even feel like chocolate after dinner anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't even miss it. And no, I'm not hungry. And I'm losing inches or whatever. And it is quite amazing. Yeah, and just that feeling of more energy and more mental focus as well. It's not just the appetite regulation that I see with, clients, and I saw with myself.
So then how did you get into the nutrition field as a career?
So when I discovered this zone diet thing, I got more enthusiastic about that and less enthusiastic about art and design. And it was a gradual process. So I started learning more about the zone diet, just gathered a bunch of friends and said, I'm going to do this talk on the zone diet. Do you want to come?
Yeah. So were you a nurse before doing your design?
Yes, I was a nurse. Yeah. First off, I trained as a nurse. And then after a couple of years of nursing post-grad, I went to design school did design and furniture and interior design, and then I went to London and did this postgrad diploma while still doing nursing part-time for an income.
Yeah.
And then came back to New Zealand and worked in that area for 10 years all up.
Yeah. And so did you have any specific nutrition qualifications at the time when you started?
No. I just got enthusiastic and started
Yeah.
reading everything I could. And I did go to the States and do the zone coaching certificate, so that I got my certificate in terms of being a zone diet coach. So that was really where I started, just being a zone diet coach.
And how was that, Julianne? Was it sort of run a little bit like health coaching might be run these days, or?
It was actually just a 3 or 4, I think it was about a 4-day full-time course in the States. And then at the end of it, there were, I don't know, because I haven't done a health coaching course here, so I can't really attest to that. So, they just gave you all the information on working with clients, all the background, all the science, and
which I imagine you would have known a lot of that anyway, but
yes, but it was good to get that from people who were working in that particular field as coaches and nutritionists, and it was only for people who had a health background, so they didn't accept anyone off the street. It was, nursing, doctors, whatever.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. So you brought it back to New Zealand and you started practicing?
Yeah, so at first part-time, and then after a while full-time. And so I just did seminars one-on-one, just all with the zone diet, and saw quite amazing results with 95% of people that I worked with. So and the same as me in terms of weight loss, energy, even health conditions improving, like when people improve the quality of their food. I remember this client coming back, and I didn't even think about the significance at the time, but there was one with psoriasis. She came back and goes, "Look, my patch of psoriasis is gone." I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting." And now I'm going, that is incredible. Psoriasis is a nasty and difficult thing to get rid of, but just changing her dietary quality made a difference. So,
and do you think as well that would have to do with the change in the blood sugar regulation and insulin and?
Yeah, look, in retrospect, because I've gone back and kind of analysed what is it about the zone diet that made a difference. So, yes, the change of macronutrients does. One of the things that there's a focus on is shifting to low glycemic carbohydrates and eating more favourable carbohydrates and less favourable ones. So the less favourable ones are generally the high GI refined grains. So a lot of people cut out grains altogether. So it's much more of a shift towards a paleo diet and the sort of thing I would use for my autoimmune clients. So I imagine cutting out grains and perhaps gluten probably made a difference, and increasing the amount of fruit and vegetables, quality proteins. Omega-3 is a big part of the zone diet as well, like getting adequate omega-3 either through oily fish or adding a supplement. Yeah, so I think a combination of factors.
Yeah. And Julianne, how did your zone diet then transition to a paleo style approach? When did that come into the mix?
That came at CrossFit. When I got work at a CrossFit gym, 2009, one of the early Auckland CrossFit gyms, then I learned about Rob Wolf and the paleo diet, and I thought I better find out about this because I'm working with CrossFit clients. So one of the papers I read was Lorraine Cordain's one, which is cereal grains. I can't remember what it's called, but
I know it, and I'll pop it in the show notes because I find it, yeah.
So he talked about the increase in the amount of grains we are eating as a society, as a population, which allowed us to expand across the globe. But at the same time, this was something that has taken up a bigger and bigger part of our daily diet. And he talked about the connection between cereal grains and autoimmune diseases. So first off, it's celiac disease, but there seems to be a flow-on effect to quite a number of other autoimmune diseases. And I have in my family, and what I probably had was an autoimmune joint inflammation. So my knees would swell up after I'd done a bit of exercise. My neck was very sore and stiff. I had ganglion cysts on my wrists, which would come up and stay for years at a time. And my mother had lupus. So that was in my family. So I thought, okay, well, this is interesting. I'll just try this paleo diet and see what happens. So that was kind of my next light bulb moment, if you like, with diet, because after 3 weeks, my joint inflammation disappeared and my ganglion cyst, which had been 10 years on my wrist, just shrunk away. And I was like, that's amazing. And I can remember talking to my dad and going, I just can't believe that my knee is not swelling anymore. It's just not. I'm not getting fluidy, hot knee, my left knee in particular. So I've now pinned it down to gluten. So gluten seems to be the main protagonist with me. And a lot of and now I realize why when I was on the zone diet, things improved, but things would come and go. So depending on how much gluten I would be having would depend on how good my joints were, my PMT, things like that.
Yeah.
So that was the next thing. And that was what got me really interested in the role of diet in autoimmune diseases, because after that, my mother with lupus went onto the paleo diet, and she had quite bad lung involvement. She had small airways disease. And in 3 weeks, her small airways disease was like markedly improved.
Wow.
And yeah, my father, who's a doctor, he'd update me on these things. So
yeah, and you ended up doing a postgraduate diploma in nutrition, haven't you?
Yes. So prior to working at CrossFit, I had actually done the graduate certificate, which is a crossover course to bring you up to degree level in nutrition, 5 papers altogether. So I had already done that because I thought if I'm going to be a nutritionist, I need to have some structured university training behind me and not just kind of do zone diet coaching forever. So by the time I got to the paleo diet, I'd done the grad cert, and then about 3 years after that, I did the postgraduate diploma over about 3 years.
Yeah. Julianne, were you, because you obviously had such a background knowledge and understanding of hormones, food, and now the sort of immune component and how it impacts health. Were you somewhat disappointed by what you were taught in nutrition school, or were you happily surprised by what you were taught?
Actually, I really enjoyed it and found it really valuable.
Brilliant.
I think the main reason is the way it's structured. So I went to Massey. Both the undergraduate papers for the grad cert and the PG dip were structured in a way that we were given assignments, and then we had to go into the clinical literature and write like literally a paper and reference it. So it actually gave me a really good understanding of researching clinical papers, writing, and evidence-based nutrition. As well, I was forced to learn nutritional biochemistry. And that is really useful, like understanding what happens from the moment a food goes into your mouth until it gets dispersed and to all its various roles around the body. And I never actually, because that's something that, it takes quite a bit of effort to learn on your own, but when you're forced to learn it, it's really, really useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like having that sort of grounded understanding of that then allows you as a practitioner to be able to sort, or like when you're out there in social media, for example, you're able to sort of sort what is, really good sound information and actually just what is almost a myth or what people might think and might seem to make sense, but actually doesn't make clinical or sort of biochemical sense, I suppose.
Exactly. And that's what I'm always asking myself. It's like, what's the mechanism here? You know, and also with the so-called fad diets, I know amongst nutritionists and I dare say it, dietitians, if people aren't doing the standard diet and somebody comes to them and going, oh, I'm doing so well on the keto diet, or I'm doing so well on carnivore, or, you know, a vegetarian diet is, this particular vegetarian or plant-based diet is really helping me. There can be a lot of dismissive attitudes towards lay people who are getting results from diets. But my point of view is, what can I learn here from this person? So I'll start quizzing them, you know, and I don't care if it's at a party because, you know, it's fun for me talking about nutrition. Like, oh, what are you eating? What have you noticed? What's changed? What happened before and what's happened now? And then in my mind, I'm going, what's the mechanism at play here? Why is this person getting these results from this diet? So I find that super fascinating. Like, and I know this is why all the fad diets, and I don't like calling them fad diets, but we'll just use that term, are getting so much traction because people see changes and get results for themselves. And all I want to do is, why? How is this happening? What's the cause? What's the reason? Because I know myself, back when I did the zone diet, I had no nutrition training other than what I learned as a nurse. And I was raving about it, and I would do it publicly everywhere. And I got a huge amount of flack from the trained nutrition community, and I would have these arguments in magazines and on the radio and all kinds of places with them. And I was that person who a lot of nutritionists would go, oh my God, that keto person on the keto diet raving about it. I was that person on the zone diet. So I get it.
No, I appreciate that. And, you know, I feel like there's a little bit of, well, first of all, I agree with you. I feel exactly the same. Like, I'm always really curious as to how someone might thrive on a particular approach, even though it's not necessarily what might work for other people. And then also, I guess you and I are probably similar in that we then want to find what is the thing that's actually going to make this stick for someone as well? Like, so what are elements of what's working for them now that can actually stick and stay and make it sort of sustainable? Because sometimes with the fad, quote unquote, fad diet, it might in its entirety sort of seem extreme, but there will be elements that you can pull and things that you can learn that you can then sort of put into place. But also, Julianne, I'd really like to get your opinion, and this is, like, have you seen more and more that anti-diet culture that is sort of pervading social media and things like that?
I do, and I'm worried about that, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'm worried about the message that it sends to people who are carrying a lot of extra weight, and it's having a negative effect metabolically on them. Because I look at the environmental aspect. So I think one thing that's good is shifting it away from you're personally a faulty person because you're carrying extra weight. Because there's so many, you know, emotional, psychological, societal, environmental aspects, genetic aspects to it. But I do worry about, is it normalizing that it's okay to carry extra weight and eat whatever is available in your environment? Because there are consequences, you know, like the human body is designed for survival. The human body will put on weight far, far more easily than it is taking it off. And that's a hormonal aspect of, you know, the whole, how our leptin works. It will make sure our fat cells are always filled up. and it's designed that way. But our environment is designed never to have us have those periods of deprivation that, say, a hunter-gatherer would, where they would then lose that body fat and then gain it again in a time of plenty. So our genes plus our environment, and with that message, those three things together, that concerns me.
Yeah. I feel similarly in that I worry for people who do carry excess body weight, that places them at that increased risk. And it does. And, and this is certainly not, I'm not talking about people who might be, who might get the real positive outcome of recognizing that, 3 or 4 kilos over what you deem your ideal weight is actually not worth the mental burden that can place on someone, So there are absolutely real positives from recognizing that you're not necessarily unhealthy just because you're in a bigger frame or bigger, but it's just a fine balance as to, is it such a health promoting message? I know it's supposed to be a really positive message, and in some ways it is, but isn't always necessarily maybe landing the way that it should. I don't know. And as a health professional, that does concern me as well.
I think there are some positives, like it takes the focus off constantly kind of being in that diet frame of mind. But to me, I don't see the promotion of healthful diets in that message particularly.
Yeah.
Because any kind of deprivation is, I don't know, this is how I hear the message, and I might be getting it wrong, but it seems like any kind of deprivation or self-control is diet culture, and diet culture is bad. And I don't think that's particularly useful. I mean, and like you, like when I first changed my diet, I had dreadful cravings for chocolate, but I would have my chicken and my salad, and then I'd have half a chocolate bar, a small chocolate bar afterwards. So I'd manage that within like flexible dieting. I actually quite like that approach much better. Yeah, but to have a sort of a no deprivation diet in our current environment, I mean, that's led us to the problems that we have today.
Julianne, I'd like to revisit where we left off with regards to your own preparation for the powerlifting. Of course, for you to move from that 53 to 52, you needed to instigate quite a low-calorie diet, as I understood.
Yes, so it is restrictive. So how I do it is I work out how much protein I need. So that's the crucial thing. So when you're wanting to calorie restrict to lose body fat, so I only want to lose body fat, I don't want to lose strength, I don't want to lose my muscle, I work out how much protein I need. So I do that at about 2.5 grams per kg body weight a day, and I divide that into 4. So 3 meals and 1 slightly smaller snack. And then I track. I cannot lose body fat and optimize my protein without weighing my food and putting it in an app. So normally I wouldn't bother with that. I just kind of know how much I need to eat. But when I'm cutting body fat, have to put it, I use Chronometer because I kind of like, it's what I'm familiar with, and I quite like that. So I cut my fat calories right down, because my carb calories I need for training. Because anything that's glycolytic, you need to have good muscle glycogen. You just feel better. And I need to have a decent amount of carbs before I train. So I cut it right down to the point where I'm losing around 300 grams a week. And I'll just track my calories. And if I'm not losing that much, I'll just drop it a little bit. And sometimes it ends up my protein is 40 to 50% of my diet. But only for that period when I'm cutting. Yeah. When I went up and competed at under 57 last year, I actually went up to 56 kilos. So I did it in a series of steps. So I cut back down to about, 54.5, and that took a few weeks. Then I cut down to 53.5, and that took a couple of months. So I don't do it fast. And then for my last kilo, it took about 4 weeks. So I lose about 250 grams a week. And that last 500 grams you do with a water cut and pooping it out.
Yeah. And any room for diet breaks in there, Julianne?
Yeah, I tend to, if I know I've got a lot of weight to lose, I won't do it all in one go. So I'll maybe do a diet for a couple of months and then maintain. And to maintain, I still have to track, because once I've lost weight, if I just go back to kind of eating what kind of feels comfortable, I tend to gain a little bit of weight back. So for a while, a couple of weeks, I will just track and get a sense of what portions do I need right now to maintain my weight at the slightly lower weight, because it's not the same amount of food as I ate when I was at a higher weight. So I tend to do it in chunks. So I'll do a diet for a couple of months and then stop for a while and then do it again. I was doing about 1,200 calories as measured in my app. So as we know, apps and measuring aren't necessarily a super accurate representation of actually how many calories I was eating, but that's what is in my app. And then for a while, I was really struggling to lose weight on 1,200, so I actually dropped it to just over 1,000 for just a very short time. It was only about 3 weeks, and then that kind of pushed me into fat loss again. And I don't know what it is. I think it's age. I think perhaps I'm fairly sedentary outside of my training, although I try and go on a decent walk most days. I think that plays a role, because I'm really not using a lot of energy apart from when I'm going to the gym and doing my training. I do need to be that low, and I know some people would look at that and go, freak out, you're doing under 1,200 calories a day, you must be dead, and that is really bad for you, and you'd go into red S and all the rest of it. But I sleep well, I still have energy, I don't have any symptoms of being underfed. My training is still going well, so I do monitor all of those things as well, because I think we need to be really mindful of the personal effect of a low-calorie diet on ourselves. I haven't been as active in my blogging as I used to be. However, I do try and pop things in my Instagram stories regularly, and I'm on Twitter as well. So Twitter and Instagram are probably the best places if you want to follow what I'm thinking about. Otherwise, if you just Google Julianne Taylor nutritionist, you'll find my website.
And that was my conversation with Julianne. Something happened with the audio right at the end of that, so you didn't sort of get our goodbyes or anything, but we captured everything that Julianne had to say, which is awesome. Next week on the podcast, I sit down and chat to Brett Scherer from Diet Doctor, cardiologist. Awesome conversation. Until then, though, you can catch me over on Facebook at Mikki Williden Nutrition, Twitter and Instagram at Mikki Williden, or over on my website, mikkiwilliden.com, where in addition to signing up to Monday's Matter, you can book a one-on-one consult with me, sign up to the recipe portal access to get an access to over 900 recipes regularly updated, my weekly email, Facebook Lives, particularly for our member-only group, and a whole bunch of other just good stuff. Till next week, team. Have a good one. See you then.